Hi class, we are now on 10.2b. We're dealing with intermolecular forces. So in solids, forces of attractions hold particles close together. These forces vary for different types of substances. In this lesson, we're going to explore those intermolecular forces. These are the forces that occur between molecules. The strength of intermolecular forces varies widely depending on the structure of the molecules. As a result, molecular materials exhibit a stunning diversity of physical properties. Broadly, intermolecular forces are divided into three key groups: dipole-dipole interactions, hydrogen bonds, and dispersion forces. So as we saw in chapter 9, many molecules contain polar covalent bonds. Depending on their shape, molecules with polar bonds often have a net dipole, meaning different sides of the molecule have a slight positive and negative charge. If a compound has a net dipole, the molecules of that compound tend to stick together due to the attraction of the positive and negative poles. This type of interaction is called a dipole-dipole interaction. Dipole-dipole interactions affect a substance melting and boiling points. To illustrate this idea, consider two flasks. The molecules in flask A have a molecular dipole, while those in flask B do not. Because of the forces of attraction between the dipolar molecules, it takes more heat energy to pull them apart. Consequently, the dipolar molecules have a higher melting point and boiling point than the nonpolar molecules have. So let's look at an example. Carbon dioxide has no net dipole. Sulfur dioxide has a small net dipole. That's why, owing to the bent shape. And acetonitrile has a large net dipole. Carbon dioxide transitions to a gas at negative 79 degrees. So the gases that we know as gases actually were solids. But in order to see them as solids, you have to get really into the negative temperatures to see that. So when we see them, they've already melted. Sulfur dioxide boils at negative 10 degrees Celsius, and acetonitrile boils at 82 degrees Celsius. Notice that the larger the size of the dipole, the higher the boiling point. Melting and boiling points are a handy way to compare the strength of different intermolecular forces. However, we must be careful in our comparisons. Heavier molecules tend to have higher melting and boiling temperatures than lighter molecules. So it's best to compare compounds having a similar formula mass. Next, let's look at a special type of dipole-dipole interaction called hydrogen bonding. Consider these three small compounds. The first compound, methane, has no dipole. Because of this, methane molecules have very weak interactions with each other, resulting in very low boiling points of a negative 162 degrees Celsius. The second compound, hydrogen cyanide, has a large dipole. As expected, its boiling point is 26 degrees Celsius, which is significantly higher. But the third compound, water, is surprising. Its dipole is smaller than that of hydrogen cyanide, but its boiling point is much higher. This surprising observation results from an especially strong type of intermolecular force called hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is a dipole-dipole interaction that occurs only between molecules containing an HF bond, an HO bond, or an HN bonds. Only between these bonds. That's it. Water exhibits very strong hydrogen bonding effects. So what causes hydrogen bonding? Recall that a hydrogen atom contains only one electron. When hydrogen bonds to a more electronegative element, which is F, O, or N, this one electron is pulled away, leaving the positive nucleus exposed. This naked positive charge attracts the negative poles of other molecules. Neighboring molecules with small slightly negative, which are only F, O, or N. So think of it this way, these molecules have a strict who's allowed party, and the only ones that are allowed to this party are F, O, or N, and that's it. And they have to be attached to a hydrogen. Slightly negative atoms, F, O, or N, can get exceptionally close to the naked positive of the hydrogen, nearly as close as a covalent bond. The result is an unusually strong intermolecular force. It's important to recognize that for hydrogen bonding to occur, the hydrogen must interact with two different electronegative atoms. For example, this image shows a hydrogen bond interaction between two water molecules. Notice that the hydrogen is covalently bonded to one oxygen. The hydrogen bond occurs between this hydrogen and another oxygen in a different molecule. To form a hydrogen bond, the hydrogen must be covalently bonding to one electronegative atom of FO or N, but also attracted to another FO or N in a neighboring atom. So hopefully this picture makes sense. Water contains two OH bonds, resulting in multiple hydrogen bonding interactions that cause water molecules to stick tightly to each other. As a result, the melting and boiling points of water are much higher than those of other small molecules. The interactions between water molecules are strong enough that some insects are able to walk on the surface of water, supported by the forces of attraction between individual molecules. The tendency of water to form droplets in the air or beads on a wax surface, like the water on this bug, also arises from the strong attraction of water molecules for each other. Hydrogen bonding plays a critical role in chemistry of life, from the fundamental way water molecules interact to the shapes of huge biological molecules like proteins and DNA. So now we're going to get to London forces. So London forces. So what about covalent compounds that don't have dipoles? At first glance, we might expect that there to be no attraction between them. However, this is not the case. Even molecules with no overall dipole exhibit a weak attraction for each other. These forces of attraction are called London dispersion forces. London dispersion forces. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not even sure why they call them London dispersion forces. I don't know if London is named after somebody. Sometimes simply called dispersion forces or London forces. London dispersion forces are related to dipole-dipole forces, but are much smaller in magnitude. Even if they are shared evenly between two atoms, electrons are constantly moving. This motion produces slight, fleeting areas of positive negative charges called positive and negative charges called instantaneous dipoles. Instantaneous dipoles are like ripples on the surface of a pool. The average surface of a pool is level, but the ripples make the water uneven. For an instant, there is more water in one part of the pool than the other. This is rapidly changing dipoles affect the surrounding molecules. A slight buildup of negative charge on one molecule will push the electron density away on a neighboring molecule. The result is a dipole on the secondary molecule and an instant attraction between the two molecules. So basically, this happens within a blink of an eye. These electrons are constantly moving. It's an imbalance in the molecule. So as they're moving, one side will be more negatively charged, the other will be more positively charged, which will attract another molecule to it just as fast, and then it'll go away, and the other molecule will go away from it just as fast. So this happens constantly over and over, but it's like a split of a second, and then it goes away. Okay, so the summary. Let's briefly summarize these three types of intermolecular forces: London dispersion forces, dipole-dipole forces, and hydrogen bonds. Of these, dispersion forces are the weakest, resulting in compounds with lowest melting and boiling points. Hydrogen bonds are the strongest, resulting in compounds with the highest melting and boiling points. When describing interactions, we often focus on the strongest force between them. As an analogy, consider the light from the sun, moon, and stars. The stars are always in the sky, but their faint light is often blocked by the light of the moon or the bright light of the sun. In the same way, London dispersion forces are always present, but their effects are slight in molecules that have dipole-dipole or hydrogen bonding interactions. Okay, so here is a picture of showing hydrogen bonding, dipole-dipole forces, and London dispersion. Okay, the strongest intermolecular force between a carbon dioxide molecules. So first you got to figure out what are these molecules, and they are covalent bonds. So this is all covalent molecules have London dispersion forces. And yes, this would have, you're dealing with polar bonds, but they cancel each other out. So there's also no dipole. The strongest intermolecular force between chloromethane, this is not balanced. So this is going to leave an uneven balance because the bond with C and Cl is stronger than the CH bonds. So this is going to leave a dipole-dipole interaction. You have a polar bond, something that's more electronegative, and it's pulling or taking up all the electronegative attraction it can from the electrons. Strongest intermolecular attraction between methanol is, now be careful, what do you think this is? This is hydrogen bonding. There is an O and an H. This is actually an alcohol. If you go into organic, you'll learn that. It's methanol, where this here, if this was just a H, this would be methane, but an OH is methanol. And this here will be attracted to another methanol compound. So the H on another methanol compound will be attracted to all of these over and over. And that's going to create that hydrogen bonding. How many of the following molecules experience London dispersion forces? So remember, London dispersion forces are in all covalent molecules. So you have to figure out, are these all covalent molecules? And yes, they are. How many of the following molecules experience hydrogen bonding? Now remember, the rules for hydrogen bonding are there are molecules with HF, HO, or NH, and they have to be attracted to another molecule of HF, HO, or HN. So it is two molecules. And that's going to be this one here, because of the OH, that's an alcohol here, and this one here with the NH. Which of the following has the lowest boiling point? So I'm going to tell you right off and make it easy on you. It's the one with the lowest mass. Since these all look the same, they're just more carbons and more hydrogens added. That makes a bigger molecule. The melting point is going to increase the temperature. You have to get to a higher temperature for it to melt. Methane is the smallest mass here, so it's going to have the lowest melting point. Which of the following is a liquid at room temperature? So again, the bigger they are, the more chance it is at a liquid, because we haven't reached the melting point to turn into a gas. And that's going to be that one here, which is butane. The structure of ammonia is shown. What is the strongest intermolecular force in liquid ammonia? And that's going to be hydrogen bonding, which is similar to what I pointed out here as the last one here. What you don't see is that it's got a lone pair on it too, and that also contributes. But it's hydrogen bonding because another compound will come in with H and it'll be attracted to the lone pair. The structure of formaldehyde is shown here. What is the strongest intermolecular force in a liquid formaldehyde? In liquid formaldehyde. And I'm just going to jump to it, and it's dipole-dipole because the H is not attached to a hydrogen, so hydrogen bonding doesn't work. It's not an ion. It is a London it's a dipole-dipole. It's a unbalanced polarity going on between the carbon and the oxygen, creating a dipole. Each of these substances have similar formula mass, which has the highest boiling point. And if you take a look at them and you don't know which it is, the next thing you should ask yourself, are you dealing with all covalent molecules, or is there an ionic in there somewhere? An ionic has a higher boiling point, and there it is.